Ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking from a very seldom individual position to you. In an individual position, thinking and acting on a very small bridge between science and politics. 16 years ago, I decided to run for the parliament and to leaving the scientific work. I felt personally, for myself, the limits of scientific work without ignoring its special meaning. But I had, and I remain to have it, a mistrust to the normal behavior of politicians too. And therefore I insisted to keep my scientific curiosity. The result was to start in keeping one leg in the science and one leg in practical political work. By doing this, I was able to avoid an involvement in both, and I was able to avoid entering of the mainstreams of the present science and politics too. More and more I found this situation very fruitful and as a basis to develop spiritual and practical creativity. I don't believe in the ability of structures, but nevertheless I think that structures are important even for the structuring of ideas and of forming public conscience. On the other side, I don't believe that we can save mankind only by spiritual things. But I believe that spiritual things are quite necessary for the development of every human structural change. It is a process of both things which we have to bring together. And I feel that the present development of the societies and its dominating science is failing, is misleading, cause of an increasing lack of spirits and comprehensive ideas and consciousness. Modern science is splitting the knowledge, leads to over-specialization, although we know more and more the necessity of overall and comprehensive views. And what happens in science happens also in the other fields of the society. I'm starting now to speak about energy. I'm not speaking about personal energy or subtle energy, a term, an English term, I admit, which is new for me, although I suppose to have a lot of it. But also, I'm not going to speak about conventional energy and its philosophy, because I think the premises of our energy system are totally wrong. You might see it in the official and scientific energy statistics. You will never find there, in contrast, by the way, to the statistics of the last century, the food, although food is the physical energy for humans and animals. You will never find there, too, the solar radiation and solar heat, although this is by far the biggest source of physical and even of subtle energy of mankind, I suppose. As I can follow it, as we can follow it, in the most ancient religions. And we know now all that the last point is not a myth. The role of the sun in the ancient religions is not a myth. but a scientific fact, well founded in the laws of nature, because the sun is the source of all life. The problem of our time is that this source is ignored in the physical energy system. It explains a lot about our present philosophical poverty, that the oldest and biggest source of energy, perhaps the only real source of energy, is nowadays defined as a new or alternative source of energy. Max Planck wrote, and therefore to recover it seems to be a new thing. In the present science, it is a new thing. And I remember a phrase of Max Planck in his personal scientific autobiography in the beginning of the 20th of the century, when he wrote, "A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather its opponents eventually die out." But because we are in the energy question, in a race against time, we have, so I am adding to Max Planck, to help for dying out in a soft manner. We all know it is impossible to continue the model of the present energy system, and this is the same as a model of our industrial countries. Since the Rio Conference in 1992 and the World Climate Conference in 1995 in Berlin, the world community has officially recognized mankind is coming to a structural crisis, is coming to a crossroad. That's the reason why the Climate Convention was adopted, for instance, and other conventions for protection of biodiversity and others. And these conventions, the Climate Convention, want to reduce the global CO2 emissions in the year 2000 to the state of consumption of the year 1990. But if we follow the forecasts of the International Energy Agency from the last year about an increase of the global energy consumption of 50% up to the year 2010, then we are already in the center of the crossroad. I feel, and I think I can explain it scientifically, that mankind is running into the biggest crisis ever happened, an existential crisis. Moreover, it is impossible to generalize the model of our industrialized countries, which was developed since the Industrial Revolution, coming out from UK or from Great Britain 200 years or more ago, because of the ecological costs of conventional energy consumption. This is the main reason. The conventional energy consumption arose with the Industrial Revolution. This Industrial Revolution was a revolution of energy technologies. It was the possibility, James Watt, to convert heat into motion, into industrial move, into the possibility to substitute humans and animals' work by machines. It was the possibility to create a modern term, energy efficiency, which means to have more industrial output with less energy. But this did not lead to less energy consumption, as we know. It created exactly the contrary. Nowadays, The industrialized countries with 20% of world population is consuming 80% of commercial world energy supply. Although these industrialized countries have better energy efficiency. Therefore, if energy efficiency alone would lead to less energy consumption in the society and therefore to less destruction of environment, then the industrialized countries must have normally less than 20% of the energy consumption in the world and not 80%. The question why it is answered with a phrase, because the industrialized countries are producing more. But why the industrialized countries are producing more? The reason is because they have the better energy efficiency. They have the better energy efficiency with the possibility to save energy in one production method, but this gives more room for maneuvering for the whole society to create new additional energy consumption areas, to open new energy consumption areas. And this is the cause of our day, and this development is not finished. The contrary again happened. The energy growth is now going more rapid than ever before. You can see it if you look to the development only of one country, that is China. China has double of the population of Western Europe, the United States of America, and Japan together. Only these three industrial hemispheres consuming with 10% of world population, roughly 60% of world energy consumption. They are using 60% of energy consumption. That means if China would have had, in the last 50 years, the same industrial structures like we have, with the same modes of consumption, then world energy emissions would be 2 times nowadays, more than 2 times more than it is. And some conventional sources would be finished. This is not a reason enough, as we can see, not to give applause to China if they try now to copy our model. I think this has nothing to do with rationality. This is a total illusion. This is totally irrational. But we cannot accuse China because they try to make a copy of us. We don't have the legitimation for this. The only thing we can do is to take another option, and this option is a principal option, not only a technological option, although we need technologies for this. The conventional energies, fossil and nuclear, have 2 historical limits. The first is that conventional energy sources are exhaustible, and among them oil, gas, and uranium, without the fast breeder technology, in the run of the next 50 years. If someone will find new sources, this may change the picture, the forecast, about 10 or 15 years, but what's the difference? There's no difference in principle. Because there is also another historical limit. This second limit is that we are not allowed, on ecological reasons, to burn off all these sources because the ecosphere can't hold out that. The only existing alternative without these limits are the solar energies or renewable energies, which is the same. But many experts are telling us that renewables could be only a long-term alternative, and some tell us it could be never an alternative. For short-term solutions, they would be too expensive. But the decisive question is expensive for whom? I come to a contrary conclusion. The longer our societies are postponing a grand strategy for the introduction of renewable energies, and this is much more, I will speak about this, than changing only the energy system, the more expensive will be its introduction, because the higher, in many cases unpayable, will be the social costs of conventional energy consumption. For the societies, the most economic and most effective way for using solar energies is to act now in a broad scale. A lot of so-called arguments of the present energy system which are going around try to doubt the possibility in general. To doubt the possibility of using solar energies, which is of using solar energies in a way which is adequate, which could be adequate for a modern industrialized civilization. But I think these counter-arguments are myths and not the arguments for. If we look to the natural potential of these sources, then we can find that solar serves to mankind, to the globe, 15,000 times more energy than mankind is in the year, than mankind is consuming in this time conventional fossil or nuclear energies. 15,000 more in the year. To doubt the conventional, to doubt the real potential is purely ideological. This source is inexhaustible. Inexhaustible as long the cosmic sun system exists. And this cosmic sun system exists following the astrophysics 5 billion years more. In a discussion, someone asked me when I put this number, if I have spoken about 5 billion or 5 million years, and I said it are 5 billion years. Then I said, then I'm satisfied. One part of this 15,000 times more energy would be enough to supply the whole energy demand of mankind forever. I think this is the biggest chance, a fantastic chance, a fantastic possibility, a fantastic opportunity mankind has. It is awful to doubt the technological possibilities. There are a lot of technological possibilities, and I don't want to speak today about this, but everyone knows solar collectors exist, and they are working. Everyone knows, or most of people know, solar panels for the direct conversion of solar light into electric power do work. Everyone knows wind energy power is possible to use wind energy power for electrical power production or for water pumping. This is a very old thing. Everyone knows that the using of running natural water for electric power production is possible. Everyone knows the possibilities, or a lot of people knows the possibilities of wave energy, of pumping the heat which is coming directly from the sun of the surface of the sea and of the soil. And biomass, a tremendous potential which is always new growing, plants are natural solar cells. In other words, it's a tremendous scope of technological possibilities to use the energy source, the only real energy we have. And to think about the possibility how to introduce this for meeting the whole energy demand of society is also relatively awful, because we need technologies for this. It is easier to answer this question than most people think. We need technology for that, and the more input in form of activities, human activities and economic activities, the more output. The more input for using such technologies, the more output as long or as far we need for meeting the whole energy demand of mankind. Therefore, it is a question how to mobilize a new idea of industrial society. How to create new industrial structures. How to create new job structures. How to create a new philosophy to do that, because this will not happen by itself, as we can see. Look to Max Planck and what he told us, or is telling us about physics, is the same. It's the same experience we can make in other fields of the society, including the political field. Solar energy is anything but a makeshift solution to our ecological crisis. In addition to ecological advantages, it will bring us comprehensive economic and social gains. Development of solar energy system would constitute an unexpected and unique opportunity to free the world's industrial societies from the damaging effects of the Industrial Revolution, and to make the positive achievements of that revolution, in particular the social, democratic and cultural opportunities which were provided for freeing men from slave labor. These positive achievements of that revolution could become available to all of mankind. Our present system we cannot generalize. Our present system doesn't meet, is in contradiction to, in my opinion, the most important philosophical phrase which was ever formulated. This is a phrase of Immanuel Kant about the categoric imperative, that no one should do things which could not be done by all, which could not be generalized, which could not be a general law. And we are acting against this categoric imperative more radical than ever before. Than ever before. Environmental destruction is among all these dangers the most dangerous element in the structural crisis, and therefore we have to look how to give priority to these questions by winning the society for it instead of mobilizing the society against it. This is the cultural art we need in the political work and in the scientific work of today. I want to speak now about the socio-economic importance of the law of entropy in order to underline the priority I'm speaking about. The fundamental reasoning behind solar energy derives from the second law of thermodynamics, also known as the law of entropy. In any conversion of matter, whether energy or other raw materials are involved, some call it the other raw materials material energy, in any conversion of matter, the emissions lead to a warming of the Earth's atmosphere or to other emissions, to radioactive contamination, water pollution, the dying of forests, air pollution, soil erosion, desertification, as well as increasingly dangerous temperature fluctuations and storms. The idea that the law of entropy applies not only to the use of traditional energy forms or technologies, but also to economies in general, was put forward as an economic theory by Nicholas Georgescu-Roegen some decades ago. He recognized the broad implications of the second law of thermodynamics in connection with the continued conversion of valuable raw materials to energy and the associated emissions of waste. He noted that a steadily increasing conversion of matter to energy would not lead to a constant increase in productivity and economic growth, but rather that it would of necessity lead to a crisis of survival. The more that limited resources are consumed, the more expensive it will be to produce them, and the larger the subsequent problems will be. Indeed, they will assume enormous proportions. For a time, the overspill from developed industrial societies can be absorbed elsewhere as a result of the globalization of economic processes. However, at some point in time, this flood of problems will have to be faced by us. And now we are entering this time. Most people are speaking about industrial growth, beginning with the Industrial Revolution. I don't think that we have that we have had real economic growth. We had, I spoke about this in another book, we have had in the last 2 centuries, and we still have, minus growth. Because what happens? The whole process in which we live is a process, the economic process, is a process of using energy, the conversion of energy to energy we can utilize, we can use, and to use this energy for the conversion of raw materials into industrial products. This is the economic process, and this is the ecological process. To split economic and ecological views is wrong, because this is the same process, exactly the same process, the process of conversion of matters and energy. The only problem is the different follow-ups we cannot follow, or we cannot have in the same country at the same time. The positive follow-ups or the negative follow-ups we experience in different fields in different countries. But the whole process is a process because the process is based on an exhaustible basis of energy and also on an exhaustible basis of materials, of raw materials, because we are using fossil raw materials mainly. This whole process is a destruction of the wealth of the globe. We are destroying energy. Energy, fossil energy and nuclear energy, which is one time used, cannot be used anymore. It is destroyed. It exists following the law of thermodynamics, but it is destroyed and we can never use it. This is one point. We have not so strong problems with the raw materials only on one reason. We have the possibilities for recycling raw materials, one-time used raw materials, but we cannot recycle 10 times and 50 or 20 times. We can recycle some things sometimes, but not forever. Therefore, we have, in principle, a same problem in the raw material questions. What we are doing since 200 years, we are exploiting all these sources we have under the soil or in the soil, beneath, and then we transporting it from one continent to another. We make the conversion, and we have more and more needs for this, and therefore we have increasing needs and a decreasing potential. A decreasing potential of exhaustible sources. And the crossroads are when these lines meet together. And this will be the turmoil of the next decades. The only option we have is to come, I started with this, to come not only to inexhaustible sources, and sources which are not dangerous by the conversion, if we make the conversion in the energy field, we have also to go, this is the second challenge we have, based on this assumption. The second challenge is to come also from fossil raw materials to solar materials, to inexhaustible raw materials, and the only inexhaustible raw materials are plants. And that means the whole development in the last 2 centuries in the economic structures is going in a wrong direction up to now. We had primarily the main sector of economy was primarily the premier sector in German, the premier sector of the economy. That means agriculture. Then we had growing up of the secondary sector, the industry, by marginalizing step by step the agricultural sector. And later on came the sector of services, of job for services, the third sector of the modern economy, which began some decades ago to marginalize the second sector of industrial activities. But all the whole third sector can only live if there is enough surplus production in the industrial sector or in the first sector. If the industrial sector is marginalized, this happens now, and we are going on with the marginalization of the first sector, and ignoring that the only possibility to have raw materials in an inexhaustible way is derived by the agricultural sector. We have to put in the development of the next century the agricultural sector again into the center of our economic activities. Not only for food production, but also for energy supplying and for the supplying of raw materials. And this is a general change of the whole economic process in the world, and changed a lot in our societies and in the power games. Why is that? The conventional sources of energy and raw materials we can find in very few places, relatively. What you can find, or one can find only in very few places, on very few places, can be monopolized, and is a matter of conflict between societies. It was a matter of conflict. The whole colonial era shows this, and is still a matter of conflict. And it will be an increasing matter of increasing conflicts in the next decades. The more we are coming nearer and nearer to the point of the exhaustion of raw materials and in the first run of energy, of conventional energies. If this is a fact, and we can view the other structure, the structure of solar energies and solar materials, which are existing everywhere, not on few places, but everywhere, in very, very different ways. Some countries have wave energy, like UK, some countries not. Some have more wind than others, some more biomass than others, some more sun than others, some more water than others. But if we look to the natural distribution, this potential is in this or this way everywhere, including the potential of natural raw materials. They are very, very different natural raw materials for very, very different needs. But it is not the fact, it is not the case that it is only on few places. It is in principle everywhere. This reduces dependencies. This reduces conflicts. This makes economies more stable, and this will lead to a better distribution of goods, more equalized by itself. And it will lead to a better division of labor in the globe. What we now have is not a division of labor. It is a competition in always the same fields. Some so-called leading technologies are defined in our culture: space, nuclear, fusion, telecommunication, and so on and so on. And then all try to play a role in this competition. Therefore, we are leaving the structure of division of labor to make different things and to bring it together in a cultural diversity. We are creating conformity more and more. We are creating a competition of more and more people for fewer and fewer things. This is again a big source of brutal conflicts and brutal social consequences. And this all is based, or begins, this process begins with limited, also regional limited sources of materials and energy. This shows the tremendous opportunity and the tremendous meaning of the question I'm speaking about. The fact is that our governments are busy around the clock dealing with the comprehensive effects of one-sided economic development, so that there is a lack of attention and funds for future tasks. This leads inevitably to a further expansion of public tasks and spending, as well as to a growth of government administration and environmental regulations. It promotes the need for private and public services. However, this trend cannot be continued indefinitely, since services have to be financed, as I spoke about, on the basis of industrial production. In the decades of rapid growth and energy, so-called growth in my definition, and energy consumption after the Second World War became larger, more centralistic, and more internationalized. This has made economies inflexible and incapable of responding to totally new challenges, since economic sectors, sectors would have too much to lose as a result. This reverses the contribution these companies made on the basis of cost efficiency methods towards economic modernization, and is leading to the preservation of obsolete structures. They still possess sufficient influence to survive with subsidies and senseless government contracts, since they can voice the threat of mass job losses. Due to expanding government debts, key government industrial projects in the military and aerospace technology sectors are facing increasing instability. And this in a period of saturated markets in the industrialized countries for products which were their most important supports: cars, radios, video recorders, refrigerators, and so on. And I assume that the modern telecommunication will be discovered as a myth in some cases and will not bring the big economic opportunities which are promised now. However, the answers that have been provided thus far have not involved new government and production policies, but rather only the economic optimization of existing structures, involving the development of new markets for the same products. I want to speak now about the new dimension of the economy. This new dimension of economy is based on the solar system. And it is doubted in a very, I think, uninformed way. This disinformation includes also, unfortunately, Georgescu-Roegen, the formulator of an ecological theory of economics, even though he has clearly recognized the absolute need for solar energy in theoretical terms. In 1986, 10 years ago, he wrote that the Promethean technology needed for the avoidance of economic and social entropy doesn't exist yet. And he argued in the following words: the direct use of solar energy does not fulfill, Georgescu-Roegen, quote, does not fulfill the minimum necessary condition for a Promethean process. In order to fulfill this condition, it would have to be possible to reproduce a certain number of solar collectors on the basis of the energy they collect. The major obstacle here is the extreme weakness of solar radiation when it reaches the Earth's surface. It follows from this that we would need a disproportionately large amount of material in order to be able to exploit a significant amount of solar energy. And this is falsified by the development of the technologies. This thesis is among the arguments constantly used by representatives of the established energy system who are opposed to solar energy because they will be the losers. That is the real reason. The economic losers. It is untenable and long since refuted. A solar cell currently, for instance, has an estimated working life of surely more than 30 years. However, in 2 years or less, a solar cell produces enough energy to pay for all stages of its production back. In the case of wind power plants, it is a half year or 5 months. The material requirement is also not a problem. Silicon, for instance, produced from sand, is available in huge quantities. If solar facades, instead of a part of house facades surface, in theory, to satisfy all electricity needs, then the material requirement above and beyond silicon would not be any greater than the material requirement for normal house construction. This line of thought can and must be expanded, since what is involved is a new dimension for the economy, the transformation of energy and matter as opposed to the production and sales of goods. Solar energy can help to replace the entropy accelerating conventional energy system. Above and beyond this, it can eliminate the use of considerable material and chemical resources. Their replacement is based on the agricultural production of raw materials to use in synthetic processes like biological materials. The recyclability of materials used thus far is a counterpart to energy savings, which in turn can only be temporary solution to the problem, or only help to alleviate it. It is only replacing these materials that we can be freed from the dangers of entropy. In other words, if agricultural production is based on the principle of renewability. This is another agricultural production than we have today. That is the general line. There are further arguments which reveal a lack of knowledge with regard to the options solar energy provides. It is said that land use rates are too high. However, only people who fail to take into consideration the land use rates in connection with traditional forms of energy production can conclude that solar energy involves a larger measure of land consumption. It is forgotten that more land has been contaminated as a result of nuclear energy use than will ever be used for solar cells or collectors for the whole energy needs of mankind. The discontinuity of solar energy available is criticized, but without giving consideration to a solar energy mix involving biomass and all the other elements of renewable energies. And biomass is just as storable as oil, coal, or gas. And therefore, there cannot be a lack of continuity. It is said that energy density is insufficient. This, again, is not a valid argument, as we will see in 1 minute. It is also said that solar energy results in environmental damage. The fact is overlooked that there is a fundamental distinction to be drawn here. The consumption of nuclear and fossil fuels lead to irreversible consequences for the entire ecosphere. The use of renewable energy technologies can at most lead to limited and reversible effects in a specific local environment, and not more. If, but then only in a very limited field. Thus far, neither national or international political institutions have been willing to undertake effective steps towards calculating the social cost of traditional energy forms. They excuse themselves by referring to economic risk with unpredictable consequences if energy prices were to rise. For this reason, social damage is apparently accepted as an unavoidable evil. Perhaps other factors associated with solar energy will be able to generate the long overdue impetus towards a solar energy revolution. Real social costs extend far beyond those that have been calculated thus far. The overall energy system is taken into consideration along with its comprehensive effects. Solar energy, on the other hand, holds out the prospects of large social gains. There is the creation of new jobs, and a lot of these jobs cannot be globalized. The creation of new jobs is very easy to explain. Why? If we are going this way, if we are taking this option, we are substituting, we are replacing economically primary conventional energy by technology. Because the primary energy, wind, solar radiation, is free of costs. All costs we have in a renewable energy system are, with one exemption, these are the costs we have to pay for the primary energy, which is the part of the future primary energy which is coming from the agricultural sector. But this is another sector than the present energy economy. Because we are in all the other fields in the situation to get primary energy, domestic sources, free of costs. All costs we have to pay for this alternative are costs for introducing the technology. In other words, in other phrases, it are costs for creating jobs, labor costs. Therefore, we will get much more new jobs in this field, much more than we will lose in the present energy economy. And it will be much more equal, because the argument of the energy density can be countered by the view that this is not an argument against using the alternative. It is only an argument that we cannot use renewable energy sources in the same structures like we have in the present energy system. A lack of energy density means we need, for harvesting these energy sources, we need several thousands of facilities instead of one. We need 2,000 windmills instead of 1,000 megawatt nuclear power or coal reactor power station. Or we need 200,000 roofs with solar cells instead of 1,000 megawatt electric power station. Therefore, it must be distributed. Therefore, it must be carried by other economic actors. A lot of private actors are among them, will be among them. This will lead to a redistribution of income. All the money which we are now spending for buying energy, and it is a lot, will remain in the own economic circle of a local or regional or national or the European or another community. Therefore, the economic level of every economic circle, a small one or a large one, will increase. The income, the average, will increase about the present price we have to pay now for importing energy. This is a gigantic step for to come to a new economy. And because we have thousands instead of one installations, and the installations must be everywhere, this will lead to a decentralization also of manufacturing work. This will lead, because of the thousands and millions of installations which must be everywhere, must be done everywhere. This will lead to the possibility of a lot of handcraftsman jobs and agricultural jobs, much more than today, instead of jobs in very few places of some industries which are now becoming globalized and looking for the best places with the lowest salaries. Therefore, and with the lowest public relations for environment and so on. In other words, this will lead to an equalization of the economy without regulations, without administration. It happens by itself. based on this alternative energy with new modern jobs. We cannot speak about the regionalization of the economy without speaking about the source of it. We can only come to a new regionalization of economy, which is necessary on social reasons for social stability. We cannot come to this with new regulations. I think this is impossible in our time and creates other problems. But we can come to this if we take the option, in principle, by a special discrimination of all these raw materials and energies which have to be substituted by us, on all these reasons I'm speaking about. Then we have, if we use all these other decentralized sources, we replacing the centralized sources with the decentralized, the unecological with the ecological, then we have a big opportunity for a new economy. Because economy cannot work without sources. And the sources will form the structure of economy. This is not a new theory. This ever happened. The whole history of economy is following this experience. And now we are in a situation to take a decision on a very, very important conscious about this thing. Going this way will reduce military costs. Only few people know that $25 per barrel oil are nowadays spent for military security of the oil sources in the Middle East. More than we have to pay for the barrel oil, which has now a price of $20. 25 for military security of these sources. This is not economic rational. And you will not find this $25 in your energy bill. You will find it in the tax bill. Not in the energy bill, but it is paid by us. In no energy bill you will find the costs for health, for our health system. The increasing diseases, cause of destroyed air, and other things which are derived by the energy system and affecting the health is tremendous. We can reduce health insurance costs in the long run by changing the energy system. And so on and so on. We will have a possibility to come to less administration. The present environmental policy is a policy which creates more and more new regulations. People think there is no other possibility. We cannot ignore the environmental problems, but as long we going on with the present sources which lead to all the problems in the conversion process, we need regulations more and more. But to have more and more regulations in the daily life, not only in the production, is not very popular. It's not very comfortable. A lot in the energy field, practically all regulations, we can give up if we have changed the energy source to renewable energies which doesn't damage the environment. And if we make all an overall view, I want to show, finishing my speech, a picture from my book, an illustration, which shows following different criteria all the social advantages of the alternative. The social advantages by comparing conventional energy, including a conventional option for the future, which is not doubted today in the public discussion, but I think which is more problematic than nuclear, by arguments you can read in my book, and here all the alternatives. If you look to all these criterions, unlimited availability, you have everywhere, if you begin here, a yes. Reduce CO2, everywhere a yes. There you have it 2 times. Reduce heat emissions, the most not fact. You have always a no in the conventional field, including the fusion option, and everywhere a yes. Land conservation, always no. Practically always yes, without the large hydro plants. But they are not anyway necessary for the future. Avoid danger of major accidents. You can see it. The results. Reduce administrative costs. Relieve balance of payments. Reduce internet. And this is, here is a yes. And this is only the fact for industrialized countries, not for the others. Not for the others. For the majority of the countries, you will must have a no here. And here, everywhere, a yes. Then, without the one exception of that, reduce international conflicts, social acceptance, reduce public transport costs, create new industrial jobs, support decentralized economic structures, increase energy independence in industrial countries and developing countries. To compare all this, to see all these advantages, and then to come to a discussion about energy, which says we can only go this way if the comparison of prices for 1 kilowatt hour shows it that it is now cheaper. It is now cheaper. Is I think not only an awful standpoint, it is a powerful standpoint, but it is an artful, an irrational, a total, a futureless standpoint, and an uncomprehensive standpoint in general. Therefore, to go this way is not the last exit, because the conventional energies are exhaustible. It is a fantastic opportunity. It is the basis for a new industrial revolution. The second one. The real second one. The first one was a revolution of energy technologies. The second one is again, must be again, a revolution of energy technologies. It must be the solar revolution. And this solar revolution makes it possible to continue the real advantages of the former industrial revolution, to continue it for us, and to free us from the disadvantages and dangers. And it makes it possible to generalize this picture, which is never the case in the existing industrial revolution, which is now in a dead end street, mainly based on the energy assumption and the energy contradictions. Therefore, I have no doubt that the day will come in which the only energy which is used on this globe will be again solar energy. The only. This day will come. There can be no doubt. there are only two important questions we have to answer. One is, will this happen in a short run or later on? If it will come later on, it will happen without a human mankind. If we will work for it in a short run, it is a big chance for the mankind. And that's the difference. So thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Herman, for that comprehensive overview of our possibilities. And I think the question that a lot of people will be asking arises out of what you said last, which is the transition from one system to another. Because it's clear from what you said that we are getting to the end of the exhaustible sources, that we have to move to an inexhaustible source. I mean, that's really a point of logic as much as anything else. But and we're going to come up against increasing pressure to do this. But how will this? How do you see this actually working in political terms? Because as you said, one of the other issues is the jobs issue. That there's a fear of loss of jobs. I mean, the BSE crisis at the moment, for instance, one of the politicians' main concerns is the loss of jobs. Rather than thinking about the transformation of jobs from one type of economy to another. I'm sure that you're working on this with your Eurosolar project and your colleagues, and perhaps you'd like to say a little more about the practical ways forward.
Directly? Yeah, directly. Okay, let me give one example which can show it very easily. I take one European example and one from my country. The European example is, at the present time, the European community is paying a lot of money for the for transnational grids, trans-European networks, European nets, including the electric power grid. To this belongs to pay the construction of a power line between Scotland and Ireland across the sea, or between Spain and the Isles of the Balears, or between the mainland of Greece to Crete. We have counted that alone the costs for the electric power line between the mainland of Greece to Crete costs more than to make investment for renewable energy technologies for the total energy demand of the whole population, including the tourists of Crete. But nevertheless, the European community says, Trans-European net is a wonderful word. We make the power line to Crete. That's more European. I don't think that it is more European to go on with construction, even it is more expensive than the alternative. In this case, it is more expensive than the alternative at the very beginning of the technological development of the alternatives. Therefore, the alternatives will become cheaper and cheaper. That is sure. That's for sure. The other things will be becoming more and more expensive. And if we would count the social costs in the prices, the most expensive alternative energy would cost less than the most cheap conventional energy. There's also no doubt. Therefore, this is a question of changing the priorities. Other
and changing the costings as well. Changing the account.
It will save public costs. Will save public costs, by the way. Then, from my country, we have coal subsidies in my country, like you have had it in UK. And
COAL rather than CKOHL.
Yeah. Coal subsidies in a total of 10 billion marks every year. 10 billion marks every year. And this saves 120,000 jobs. That means that costs more than if we would give to all the workers the same salaries they have now and close the mines. Is this rational? It's not rational. And I made a plan to reduce the subsidies every year about 10% and bind this reduced sum of 10% for 5 years to give an incentive for the creation of new jobs in the new energy alternative. And then I counted that we would save in the next 15 years 50 billion marks, public money. Although we could give in the same time 50 billion for the creation of new jobs, and this would be jobs with future, for good things, for saving the environment, and surely more than the 120 for which we are paying 10 billion marks every year. Therefore, we have to show to the people that they have a better future if we change the priority with intelligent strategy. And because this was not done in UK with such an alternative, and in Germany this alternative is not running, it is a conception, but not an official government position, not a position official, not yet a position of my own party. But if you would have had such an alternative for the coal workers 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I think the coal mines would be also disappeared now, but with a better alternative for the people. They would have alternative jobs today on their own places.
Thank you very much. We are running rather short of time, coffee. I just take one question from here today and one question from you, Peter, and brief answer, please. Tadeusz Gromboy has been talking about climate change in relation to our current situation, the fact that this is happening already and it's having implications.
Climate change which has happened already and which is destroying already a lot of our nature as we have it. Floods in places where there are no floods and dryness in places there was no dryness. It is only in February this year that officially it has been stated, when I say officially I mean by university people and the government, that the extremes of weather are going to change rapidly. Well, they are changing rapidly. Worldwide, I shall not go through all the statistics. Next year will be even worse. We've been saying that the ice is going to melt very much more rapidly than general global heating. Last Sunday in the Guardian Sunday, the headline, the top of the first page, was that very statement, which was completely negated by scientists and politicians until now. We, the Institute, of which I happen to be president and my wife a director, believe in everything that Herman, you have stated. But we also believe that there is no time for governments to for governments to cause all this to happen. And the way we have chosen is to create centers in which all these things are being created. Solar panels, windmills, self-sufficient centers, used as hotel, conference centers, but also community centers, as an example of what can be done, and for people to learn how to do it themselves worldwide. We travel through the whole world, spending some 4 months a year traveling around the world, trying to show what can be done and how it can be done. I'd love to chat with you privately afterwards. But what we do have to realize is that the weather changes are absolutely dramatic. We're seeing it now. We'll see it even more in the next month and 2 or 3 years.
Thank you.
No, it's not to comment it. It is. I agree totally with him. It is a race against time, and I think it's a question we have to answer, not to begin, to answer in the next 3 decades.
Thank you. Peter?
We'll take one question from here. Just a very quick point I want to make. That is that solar energy, I think, only becomes possible when there is a window of technological development. In other words, if technology is too simple, you can't develop it. So you have to wait for that particular technological window before you can start developing solar power.
You have to put the money into the research to do it.
You have to put money into the research, but there's got to be the scientific technology and basis.
Right.
And also support the idea of a service industry. We put up a window in Scotland, and goodness me, there's a little pool of service people all around its base continually. Now let's have the question from here. Yes, you were first, I think.
Okay, I want to say...
There's the question coming.
Excuse me.
Anne Bingley from Somerset. Dr. Scheer, what support do you have worldwide for your ideas, and with what practical results?
Half an hour there.
I want to begin with the last point. It is not possible to measure it, because a lot of my work is trying to convince others and to give them a kick. In the last year, I counted, at the end of the last year, I counted my speeches of 95, and it were 280 in 1 year in different countries, and in a direct communication to 80,000 people altogether. And if I was successful in giving a kick, there will be a multiplication, because the people who are coming to such events are more the active people, are multipliers, and so on. And I think because I'm doing this thing some years, I think it had a little success in changing the public opinion and giving motivation to a lot of people to go this way. And I cannot count it. It is impossible to count it. All the by-effects of this. But the countries in which I am acting more than in others, in my own country, it's natural that I'm acting more there, and there I have a more convincing language, and ability to speak. Then I think one result is that in my own country nowadays 70% of the people believe that this is the alternative. 70%. Although there are hundreds of millions of public relation money of the energy power system to tell the people that this could not work. And therefore, this is, you can see the difference. Therefore, changing the public opinion was one thing. More and one concrete thing was I introduced in the German Parliament the law for that renewable energy, electric power must be taken over by the grid, supporters and for a special price which is fixed in the law. This created a boom of wind energy, of windmills. In the last 5 years, the law is since the 1st of January of 91, a boom that we have now 1,200 megawatt windmills in 5 years, 95% by private owners. 95%. We have now a wind power production industry with more jobs in Germany, with more jobs than the whole nuclear energy industrial sector serves. With more jobs in only 5 years, although there are a lot of remaining resistances against it. Therefore, this is one result, and the first steps are always the slower steps. And until we are meeting we have enough critical mass in order to come from snowballs to lawines, positive lawines, and therefore this is one point. The other, in my own party 5 years ago, 7 years ago, I was chairman of the Committee on Arms Control and Disarmament of the German Parliament, and I had the image to be the coming foreign relation speaker of the party and coming foreign relation minister. If my party would have won elections, what doesn't happen since 1983. Therefore, but I gave up this because I had the idea it is impossible to go on with this situation. This decisive is so important, but nobody cares about it in the political sector. And therefore I gave up the other things and said, now I try to put these questions into the center. The first reactions, including reactions of own friends, were he was always a very pragmatic man, but now he is becoming not only unrealistic. He is begun to in German spinnen. I don't find it. Yeah.
Means go slightly off your head.
Yeah, off your head. Yeah. Er spinnt was told, and some say, "Oh, what is? You should speak with him." I think I have the imagine that he will stop his political work. He will finish his political work because otherwise nobody can do this. Now I think I have the majority for this question in the party, not in the leadership, but in the basis. It's the difference. For it is a revolution from the ground, and this is
that's the point.
Yeah, that's the point, and it is and I speak about this, and I appeal to this. The political opinion, the political purpose is to help to this movement to have enough room for maneuvering, to organize bridges and so on, to eliminate barriers of the present energy system and so on. This is a political purpose, but the real activities, the hardware activities, they have to come from the people. It is a new. I think it is a new movement society needs, and one of the big opportunities of this alternative is a decisive alternative in which we have. It is not anyway necessary to wait until public or private big apparatus and monopoles begin to change their priorities. Because they are not the adequate supporters of this strategy by structural things.
Right.
Therefore, the alternative is better in the hands of decentralized activities. That means more in the hands of the society of new peoples who are carrying it. enterprises who are becoming, besides their other work, energy producer, private people, and so on and so on. And the big opportunity is that this decisive question can be taken over by the people. And the people must wait for the decisions or the moves of others. Not anyway. This is a big point. And that shows it is also a very democratic alternative. Very, very democratic. Without such a deep democratic mood, society will be unable to go that way. We can show this 1 minute more. Excuse me.
Half
1 minute. Yeah, half a minute.
We're running into coffee time.
We have the Solar Organization introduced the same law as in Germany, in Italy. But in Italy, the law I spoke about is not used. In Germany, it is used. Why it is used in Germany? Because there are now activities within the societies, people which have the kick up. And in Italian, it fails, or there is a lack of this now, because the whole attention is given to the political scandals and so on and so on. And therefore, this shows the difference. It is a cultural difference which creates different activities. So now to the other point, the first of the other room.
Briefly, very briefly.
Yeah.
We're already 10 minutes into time.
Surely there must be more research and development, but this is not a reason to wait for market introduction. Because to come to the optimum of a technology was never possible in the labor. Only by experience. It was all possible by the introduction of technologies, by making thousands of practical experience and to communicate this experience into the production process, changing the development, bettering the development, and creating new possibilities. This was in every technology the case. And therefore, if we want to give more speed, and it is necessary, we need market introduction, even for the question of better technological developments, because there will be a technological development for all these technologies for 100 years and more, but it will come by direct introduction.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming over from Germany to give us what you call a kick. I don't know how much we needed one, but certainly we received it with pleasure. And thank you also for speaking in English. I know exactly what you feel like, because 3 weeks ago I was giving lectures in German myself in I think obviously a lot of these ideas are very new in terms of their implications and how deep they go into our economic structure. And the point that you made, that our energy structures determine effectively our economic structures, is one that I think we'll all go away and think about and read up to see what we can do. Because I'm sure most people in this conference will be anxious to make some sort of difference themselves in the direction that you're talking, because we're all moving in that direction, and we all feel, I think, that we're not moving quite quickly enough. And so thank you very much indeed, Herman, for coming over and giving us such a stimulating talk.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to speak this afternoon about, I'm afraid, just ordinary common garden physical energy, but perhaps a slightly subtler way than you would very glad to hear Herman's talk this morning, which I thought was terrific. And in many ways, it's allowed me to jump off where he left off. But you'll find in the course of my talk, I'll keep just crossing over various things. That allows us to touch bases quite nice, I think. The energy is very deeply associated with human development. Pointer here. This is the amount of energy that used by individual people at what we might plausibly argue are coherent stages of human development. In the very early days, the amount of energy is just what you eat, basically. Yeah. With fire, you can double that, perhaps more, if you really manage to set the whole forest alight. But it's usually not much use to you. In early agriculture, you're actually growing energy in the form of crops, and you can feed it to animals, and then you've got the energy of the animals. Then we get the level of high civilization, which is the sort of thing that Romans achieved, or in Britain, say Tudor Britain, pre-industrial high civilization. And very often you've managed to capture other sources of energy, but all renewable. Yeah? At that point, nobody had discovered the fossils. So the critical breakthrough is the discovery of the fossil fuels. And then suddenly there's a big jump in energy use, because suddenly there's this treasure hoard that's been accumulating for millions and millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, and nobody discovered it before, and suddenly we came across it, and there it was. So along with various other technological changes, it allowed a complete change in the nature of human society, and then it carried on. So now here we are using a huge amount of energy today. Now, if you look at that, if you actually ran this as a proper time scale, it would just be more or less a vertical line sticking up out of a flat line on the bottom. So it's a very stark difference that's happened in a very short time. Now, it's fair to ask, is this going to go on? If we replace that now with something very similar, but just looking at the energy consumption in various different parts of the world, can you see that? It'll come as no surprise to you that North Americans use the greatest amount of energy per head of any region in the world, and Africa and Asia use the least. The disparity is very stark, as you can see. So in a way, this is more or less another version of the graph that I just showed you. Yes? Now, if this is an inevitable pathway, and that we're all destined to end up here, and indeed Americans are destined to go on using energy even more, then we will certainly come into some kind of critical situation, as Herman Scher was saying this morning. And in fact, 20 years ago, that was the orthodox picture. Look at that. This is what they thought. This graph was done in 1976. Yes? So they only had historical data to there, right? This is what they thought would happen afterwards. And of course, if you're in the energy industry, you have to make predictions, because you have to know how many power stations to build, how many oil wells to sink, and so on. So you have to make projections, you have to make guesses about what it's going to be. And this is what they thought the future was like in energy terms. And all the energy industries have been based on that assumption, and in a way, all our education and everything we have been told, been brought up, certainly in my life, is just this general expectation of onwards and upwards. That was the forecast in 1976. No, this is primary energy. Primary energy. The total amount of energy that we need to extract. The amount that we use is different, but I don't go into that right now. Perhaps any questions later. Yes, primary energy. Now, the implication of that is, in a way, quite startling, and I can express it with this one here. This is a version of that graph I showed you with the different geographical regions and their energies per capita, but this time I've put the population in proportion down the bottom. So here we have the developed countries here with their very high per capita use, and here we have the developing countries here with their not so high. And the area under this curve is the total amount of energy we are currently using. Now, how much are we going to have? How much are we going to need if everybody wants to be an American, as it were? We must put in the people who are in the pipeline, the number of people that we expect to have, about 10 billion, probably a little bit more maybe, by the end of the next century. So they'll all need energy too. Now, if everybody's an American, then the area that's surrounded in red is the extra energy we will need to run things in an American way. And if the Americans have gone and continue to grow, then we'll need even more. Now, the interpretation of this graph depends on whether we think it's going to go on like this. Is it going to go on onwards and upwards? And in fact, what's happened is it stopped in the Western world. Let's call it the North, the developed countries. Let's call it the North. And the developing countries I should call the South, for short. So if we look back at this one again, this little hiccup here, which was caused by those funny events in the early 70s, that turned out not to be a hiccup at all. That was a trend. And so you're now here, and it's been flat ever since. This is Britain. But it's true of most developed countries. Most countries in the North, also the energy growth has been flat, the primary energy. It's risen a little bit, but not very much. And now we've, according to the Rio Accords, we've promised to keep it flat. So you could say that you are now living in a historic watershed, right? For the first time, we've actually somehow decoupled energy from the growth in wealth of the society. It's an unusual thing, and it hasn't been remarked on very much. Let me show you what happened in the 19th century. This is getting wealthier. This is the amount of energy you use. Yeah. So at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, we threw energy at everything. We had relatively cheap coal that we discovered, and we were using energy at a to very little effect in terms of increasing wealth. Yes, that's a sign of very great inefficiency in energy, or I would like to say intensity, energy intensity. I'll keep using this word intensity, so I'll introduce it now. The energy intensity is the amount you need to produce a certain increase in the GMP. Thereafter, it got a bit better, and it got a lot better up here. And so if we take the story from the 1950s, we're actually looking at its energy intensity. It dropped from about 165 units down to about 90 in 1990. This is quite an important trend. That's quite important. It gives us a little bit of hope that things are not absolutely disastrous, that the intensity, the amount of energy that we need to do the things we like to do is steadily dropping. It's very steady. It's very steady. And it could go on doing that to quite a degree. That's quite important. But we have taken into account global warming. Let's go back to this. This is nearly all fossil fuel, right? If that black area there is the amount of energy we're using now, nearly all of it is fossil fuels. There's a nuclear bit here. There's another bit for hydro, which you can't really see. But this is basically fossil fuels. But the climatologists are saying this is already too much. They think that we should have a cut to 60% of the present levels. That's represented by this line here. I've put it as a single line because I think we have to accept that, in principle, all human beings have an equal right to energy. We all have an equal right to dump CO2 into the atmosphere which is what it amounts to if you're burning fossil fuels. And if we distribute that evenly over the whole of the population sometime in the next century, this is about what it would be. This would be the permissible level of fossil fuel use. So it's pretty drastic. It's nowhere near this. In fact, for most of the countries here, you are here, it would mean a very substantial drop in energy. Now, remember what happened when they threatened to raise VAT on fuel. There was a terrific fuss, and the government nearly fell. Well, perhaps not, but anyway, there were a lot of tremblings. You imagine the political consequences of having to do this in a short time. But it's possible. I think Hermann Scher introduced it very well. He showed it's possible if we have the imagination and the political courage to do that. What would it mean in Britain if we were to reduce our fossil fuel use down to 15%, which is what this implies? Remember, ethically, it's an ethical question. We should do it. That's our fair share. So what are we going to do? There are three logical possibilities. This is where you are now. This is the current energy pie. It's nearly all fossil fuels, the black fossil fuel. Yes. And there's a bit, this nuclear and hydro. Now, we can either shrink it down to 15% and keep the mix exactly as it is, or we can keep it the same size and turn to non-fossil sources. Remember, we're allowed to keep a little slice. That's our permitted bit of fossil fuels. Or, of course, you can have a combination of both these things. Now, I just want to examine these two extremes. Now, remember, this is to some degree likely to happen. And so, as citizens, we have to be informed about these things, and we have to make up our minds what's the thing and what are the right paths to go down. Let me first look at this. And I think this was very well dealt with, really, by Dr. Scher this morning. But I want to emphasize the fact that, as he said, he mentioned this statistic of 2,000 windmills to replace one power station. The size of windmills we use typically in Britain, it's more like 5,000, or in some cases even 10,000. It's a lot. The biggest wind farm that we have in Britain is 100 machines. There's a lot of fuss about it. So you see what I mean. We need hundreds and hundreds of those things, and that's just one power station. And the power stations are just about electricity, not the whole of the primary energy and so on. It is going to make a difference to us if we go down this route and try to replace this large pie completely with renewables. Possible, we do have them, but it's going to make a lot of difference. In fact, what we're going to get is we'll probably end up, let's say we went down the route where there wasn't so much total renewables, you would end up with something like this. This is a good parlor game, trying to cut up the pie and saying, oh, no, a bit more of this, less of that. See, here's our fossil bit. And the rest of the pie is divided up into various renewable sources. Yes, wind power, tidal power, hydropower, biomass, all the usual things. And on this one, there's a nuclear chunk as well. But perhaps we'll ignore that for now. But here we are. This is still a lot of renewable energy to have. And there's a big fuss about wind power at the moment. People don't like it. They say it spoils the landscape. It's not very nice. If we were to have biomass plantations, we'd have huge, thousands of square kilometers covered with energy crops. People wouldn't like that either. They'd complain about it, like they complain about rape fields. If we have tidal barrages, you'll be able to see it from the shore. People say, this is not very good. We don't like it. Solar power, hydropower, people complain about dams. You can't get away from it. If you want the energy, you've got to pay for it. It has an environmental impact of one kind or another. And generally speaking, when you change your energy source from one to another, you swap the environmental impacts. And so we can't pretend that we're escaping from environmental impact by substituting one energy for another. I can perhaps make this point more clearly by showing you this now. I won't go into this in great detail, but what I've tried to do here is to classify various environmental impacts in terms of their ethics, if you see what I mean, rather than the technology, in terms of their ethics. Because each of these categories represents a different value system, different set of values. It's all comes under the heading of environmental impacts, but it's different values. So, for example, people who worry about the natural world and think that it has its own kind of rights and that we should try to minimize our interference with it would be worried about the impact on the natural world. For example, coal emits a lot of acid rain, so it's very bad in that respect. I should say that the darker the splodge in the cell, the greater the impact, as judged by several classes of students that I tried it out on. So you shouldn't take this as literally. This is just an illustration. Everybody fills this matrix in a different way, but it gives you the general idea. Whereas human health is a human-related thing. It's nothing to do with animals or plants or the natural world. Human health involves a different set of values. Visual involves another set of values. You see what I mean? In very often in the wind farm debates, if there's a public inquiry about wind farms, you'll see a group of people on one side, usually wearing suits and ties, saying, we're the environmentalists, we're arguing against the windmills. And on the other side, there's, no, we're the environmentalists, we're arguing for the windmills. There is no single coherent set of environmental values that you can just get out and say, yes, this is environmentally good. They nearly always conflict with each other. So you have to make choices in different kinds of environmental values. This one is interesting. This routine human health is one thing. I mean, people might be prepared to put up with, let's say, 20,000 deaths a year from a particular kind of energy technology if it was distributed, and it was a bit difficult to pinpoint it, but they probably wouldn't tolerate 20,000 deaths from in one incident. You see what I mean? We tend to feel differently about that. There's another set of values that comes in there. So that's an important category too. But the important thing is the renewables tend to score badly on the visual amenity side. This is very important. Whereas the fossils tend to score badly, certainly on the climate side, which could affect everything else, and not very good in the natural ecology. Nuclear doesn't score very well on catastrophes, of course. Neither do big dams, because there's a possibility of something not very good happening there. Many of this was captured in that huge table that Dr. Scheer put up. Very interesting. You're full of useful information on that table. And this is, I'm coming at it here from a slightly different angle. But what's important is that the renewables, their main impact is on visual and what people feel as sort of aesthetics and amenity. And that's the reason for that is fairly obvious. It's just that because of the low energy density of most renewables, the things have to be big. You see what I mean? If I'm a windmill, I'm trying to catch some wind. The only wind that I can capture is this area, right? The bit that went past that bit. I'd have to be bigger to get that. So the amount I can get is proportional to my size. Or I have 2 of me, or 3, or 1,000. You see what I mean? So the amount is proportional to the size. So if you want a lot, you've got to have big things, or you've got to have lots of them. Can't come. They tend to be very visually intrusive. But, very important, it's not talked very much in terms of ethics, the ethics of the things. I would argue that it's far, far preferable to these other things. Yeah? If we want energy, we should put up costs. And these visual costs are, I think, ethically speaking, should rank below these other costs. Furthermore, you can take them down afterwards. If you don't like them, you can take them away. They're reversible. Whereas you can't change. If you find in the middle of the century that the climate is on the plug hole, and you can't sort of say, well, you know, we'll rewind the tape, we'll go back to the beginning. You can't reverse it. You can't reverse catastrophe. The ethical basis for renewables is very, very strong. And add to that all the things that Dr. Scheer mentioned about decentralization and all political, I think is very, very important. It's no accident that we use the word power in both political and a energy sense. They do tend to follow each other. High concentrations of physical power are associated with high concentrations of political power. And that's not so good. It would be better to distribute everything, and that's an advantage of the renewables. That helped with the. I've been looking at the let's change the source side of this one. Now let's look a bit more at this, and rest of my talk will be about that. It looks very drastic to shrink by that small, and it is. Except that we find in the energy business that it's generally much easier and quicker and cheaper and more convenient and has much less environmental impact to use less to do the same thing than it is to put that same amount of resources into generating a source. You see what I mean? It's nearly always cheaper at the beginning anyway. When you've reduced the pie to about a half, then it starts to get more expensive, and then it's more feasible to start to develop the renewable sources. And that's why a mixed pie like this is almost certainly what will happen if we go down this sensible, rational route. Now, what does this mean for the future of the environment? I want to do a kind of thought experiment now. I want to sort of move us into the next century in a kind of thought experiment. I say, if present trends continue, what is going to happen? Now, clearly, the environmental impact of an industrial society has got quite a lot to do with the number of people in it. Right? If there were only 2 people living in Britain, it didn't really matter what they did. I mean, in terms of consumption and technology and everything like that, it wouldn't make any difference. If there were 1 billion of us, again, it probably wouldn't matter how careful we were, it would be very difficult to fit in. So population is a very important part of the overall environmental impact. And so is the amount you consume. If each person consumes a great deal, obviously that makes a difference. So, thought I had a. Let me write this down as a. See that? P, population, yes. Times the consumption. Very simple one, this. But that's not all there is to it, because there's the other factor that I talked about before, the intensity. And we know that that changes a lot. So some societies are very clean and other societies are very filthy. Some industries are very clean and other industries are very filthy. But to add them all up together, we could talk about an overall level of environmental impact per unit of consumption. For example, let me give an example. Well, when I was a lad, people all had coal fires, open fires in the houses. There was perhaps 1 or 2 coal fires in a house, and you burnt coal on it. The efficiency was ludicrous. It was about 10% or 15% of the total energy in the coal actually came into the house. And the amount of pollution produced per unit of heat was enormous. Now we have gas central heating is the normal thing. It's much, much more efficient. Now, it's true that we've tended to take that efficiency in the form of better comfort. As Dr. Scheer mentioned also this morning, that's a great tendency. We tend to make things more efficient, and then we'll take the comfort rather than, or the greater consumption rather than the lower energy efficiency. But on the whole, that's an example of something where we've gone from a very inefficient technology to a much more efficient one. And in fact, this is happening all the time. And I think we could say that energy, in many ways, is a proxy for everything else. If we measure the energy used by a society and its general intensity, which I shall call T, a bit confusing, but I shall call it T, then if we measure that for energy, at the moment it seems to be quite a good standard for nearly all other environmental impacts too. Most of the environmental impacts of a society seem to follow the energy. So we could say that, in fact, the way I define these things, the way these things are defined, it means this is literally true by definition, although it's not always easy to measure this particular. So very simply, we've got P times C times T is a measure of the total environmental impact. Now, how are these going to change in Britain in the next century? We know that the population is stable, right? So that's just the same as it is now. So that's not going to change. We can expect that the consumption, the level of consumption, if sort of historical trends continue, will go up at least twice. Yeah? It's gone up twice, actually more than twice, in the last 50 years. So we can say, well, perhaps it'll slow down a bit, the rate of growth of GNP. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that it'll be twice as much. Now that means that in order to keep the impact the same, this has got to come down by at least a half the intensity. But we've seen that historically it's coming down very nicely. And for all sorts of reasons, we can expect a lot of effort to be put into trying to improve this and make this lower still. Perhaps I can give an example. I got this one from a very high-placed executive in Shell. So this, in a way, represents the official view of where we're going with technology. He's using the word dematerialization in perhaps a manner which is slightly unfamiliar to you, but this crops up all the time in economics. And it's what's happened, in fact. He's talking about technological dematerialization. And you can see the way it could happen. We could use very tiny little tiny robots. We can use miniaturized information technology. It's happening all the time at a terrific rate. We can use fancy advanced materials, much lighter than ones today. We can do things virtually. We won't have to go on holiday anymore. We can just strap some big thing on our heads and come back 3 weeks later and say, well, that was really good. And you'll use a lot less petrol doing it that way, biotech and so on. I won't go into details, but you can see there's a lot of scope for this. I don't want to run this down. There's a lot of scope for this, but this is the sort of thing that we trying to think of new alternative ways of doing it, don't have to worry about because they're doing it. This is happening anyway, and very, very rapidly. So, for reasons like this, and also because the whole economy in Britain is becoming dematerialized, economists talk about that, as we move from a manufacturing economy to a service economy, the whole thing is much less dematerialized. We've come a long way from the early days of industrialization. We have all our infrastructure, most of our roads, buildings, and so on. So we're just sort of ticking over, and we can use much less. So on that account, when you multiply those three things together, these P times T times C, you get something like that. So here is the level now. This is just proportions of the present level. Here we have, and it comes down quite nicely, really. In spite of the fact that the consumption goes up twice as much, it comes down. And so this sort of, this is not fancy computer stuff. This is just me with a pencil and paper. This is just a graphical way of expressing what I've been saying. But this is roughly what you get. And this is sort of in tune with most ordinary thinking, that our environmental impact, our intensity can keep up with consumption, and we can make improvements in the environment as we go on. Now, much more interesting and much more surprising is what's going on in developing countries. Because remember, this will probably stand for Germany, for France, for the United States, very roughly. Most of the North will probably behave like this. In the South, it could be very, very different, because they haven't got through the various hoops of development that we have already done. This is probably what will happen in the South. Here's the population, and it's expected to go up not quite double, and then it will level off. That's fairly clear. Here's the consumption per head. Now, that's not a prediction. I'm just saying, look, really, it ought to go up very steadily. At the moment, the level is such that it's about I don't know, a seventh, typically about a seventh of what it is in the north. Yes, I think nobody's going to argue that the world should remain unequal forever. So someday, somehow, the south has got to catch up. And so if we postulate that at the end of the next century, they'll be 5 times better than they are now in terms of material welfare, that still hasn't caught up with where we are now. So it's quite a conservative assumption. But I think we should say that ought to happen. Now, the difficult thing to talk about is this intensity here. Now, as they're just beginning their industrial process, then historically, this is what happens. It always gets worse before it gets better. See, if you think about what Manchester was like in 1890, and you look at it now, it is a bit cleaner, isn't it? In spite of the fact that everybody's much richer, it's cleaner. If you compare the Thames and the Ganges, for example, or if you compare the air quality in Geneva and Bangkok, say. See what I mean? Early industrializing societies don't care very much about environmental quality. They're just too busy churning out the stuff. That's the way it's gone historically. And they've got to build up their infrastructure. They've got to do lots of cement and concrete. They've got to do roads. They've got to do buildings. They've got to do lots of things just to build up the basic infrastructure. And so necessarily it's very highly intense at the beginning. And then there's another thing that's happening is that we are actually cheating slightly. We are transferring some of our filthier technologies to them. It looks like a service economy. That's because we're buying our steel from somewhere else. You see what I mean? So for all those reasons, we can expect quite a sharp rise. Who knows how much? I don't know. I've looked at many, many different sources, and this is a kind of average of think that it could go up to about 3 times what it is now. After that, we can expect it to come down for all the same reasons that it comes down in the north. Because history shows that that's what happens. The better technologies all around. The elites in the developing countries will be demanding it, just as they did in Britain in the 19th century. When they realized that the cholera epidemics couldn't be contained in the poor part of town, they were very quick to press ahead with the sewerage system and get everything cleaned up. And they didn't want to suffer from all those diseases that couldn't be contained. And it's exactly the same elsewhere. So I think that there will be lots of pressure from the elites. But also it makes economic sense. And if the great vision of Hermann Scher takes off, then there'll be all sorts of reasons. There'll be very vigorous technological transfer of all these new renewable technologies. So for all those reasons, we can expect those positive trends to overcome the negative ones quite soon, I should say, 20 or 30 years. That sounds quite reasonable. Okay, so now I'm just putting forward a set of reasonable assumptions. These are not predictions. They're just middle-of-the-road reasonable assumptions about that. Now, what does that mean? It means that when we multiply these things together, which, remember, they're multiplicative, you get something which is quite surprising in many ways. You get a rise in the total environmental impact of about 10 times what it is now in the south before it starts to come back down. Now this is, altogether, it's a mixture of 2 different transitions that are happening. The population is still growing, but it's slowing down, but it hasn't quite finished slowing down, and this sharp peak of this ecological transition going through this filthy phase of early industrialization, you put those 2 together with strongly rising consumption, and you inevitably get that. Now, the difficulty is adding those 2 curves together for the north and the south, and it requires all sorts of heroic assumptions. But anyway, I've done the best I can, and what we seem to get is that. And if anybody can find a good reason why all this is completely wrong, I would be more than delighted, because I don't want it to be true. But this looks like the possible picture that the world that we'll be living in which the total environmental impact goes up about 3 or 4 times what it is now, and then it comes back down again. Here's us down here, and here's the developing countries. Now, what this means, it means all sorts of different things. One of them is that our relative contribution, which at the moment is perhaps twice what it is in the developing countries, that'll soon reverse. Yeah, at the moment, we are, in total terms, filthier than the third world. But as they get into this development stage, then it's going to get a lot worse for a little while. And so we will be, in a sense, almost bystanders. Yes, the action will be elsewhere. What we do probably won't make a lot of difference in material terms. This, by the way, is the sort of using energy as a guideline, the carbon dioxide production level. This is supposed to be the IPCC recommended level. So we are able to duck under that with our advanced technologies and so on, but it will be quite a while before the developed world does so. Now, this bit here, which I've called Sweden, that's a bit of a joke, but sorry, apologies to anybody who's actually from the real Sweden here, but it's called Sweden because it's a world, a hypothetical world, where things aren't getting any worse. There's reasonable affluence, there's reasonable equality, there's sensible environmental policies looking ahead into the future. The population and the environment are pretty well in balance, and things are sort of under control. And that's an important place, because what it means there is that you can go back and clean up anything that is reversible. Yes? But you can't clean up things, unfortunately, that are irreversible. So if by the time you get there you've lost all your rainforests, or tigers, or whatever it is, it's probably too late. It's difficult to get them back again. So I would say that things like rainforests and habitat conservation are probably examples of the truly sustainable problems list that we have to keep while we're getting through this process. There might be other things which we could leave. You know, they look like bad problems, but they're only long-term problems. So perhaps we could leave them. I thought of an example the other day of yogurt pots. Some people assiduously save all their yogurt pots. And somebody once did a calculation for me and said, look, you know, all these yogurt pots, he worked out how many yogurt pots are produced in Britain. And he said, you know, in 20,000 years' time, do you realize all these yogurt pots in the landfills, it's going to be like the White Cliffs of Dover, you know, it's just incredible. It's not sustainable, he's saying, right? So we must, you know, etc. But in the context of 100 years or 150 years, then, you know, we can handle the yogurt pots. And in Sweden, one afternoon, we all sit around and we'll say, what should we do about the yogurt pots? And we'll be able to solve it easy. Yeah? In Sweden, you can solve anything. That is still a problem to be solved. And more controversially, I could say, for example, what to do with the nuclear waste that's sitting on the surface in Sellafield. I'd say, leave it there. You know, we've got too much on our plate to worry about the permanent disposal of that. Leave it there. And then in Sweden, we'll sort out what to do. Put it in the ground, or I don't know. You see what I mean? There might be A, environmental problems, and B, environmental problems. Rather controversial here, what's going to go on those two lists. But there's a difference here between medium-term sustainability and long-term sustainability. Yeah? I'm suggesting that long-term sustainability, forget it. We can sort that out later. It's the medium-term. We've got to get through this period with all flags flying. So that's very important. Right. The other problem that we have is, and it has a lot to do with transferring technology and trying to get the whole world looking green, is this big peak is caused by development. And so some people have argued, cut. You know, let's not have any more development in developing countries. And then this won't happen, and then everything will be all right. And I really honestly think that is not an option, because it's happening anyway. And the problem is, to get through to the other side, everybody in a society has to have a reasonable level of material sufficiency. That's very important, that they have that. Otherwise, these transitions are not complete. The demographic transition, people don't stop having lots and lots of families until they feel secure. Societies don't start cleaning themselves up until they have a reasonable level of per capita income. So we've got to start this process in order to finish it, it seems to me. This is highly controversial, and I'm willing to argue the toss with anybody who who would like to argue about it, but it seems to be this is a consequence of just normal assumptions about what things are going to happen. What should we do? I think that it's very important now to look at what should we do here. Physically, it's not going to make a great deal of difference what we do because the action is elsewhere. But I think we do have a very important role to play. And it's not economic dematerialization, it's not technical dematerialization, although we have a part to play there, but cultural dematerialization. And that's very, very important, I think. We've got to start pioneering that in order to speed up this whole process, and so that the people in developing countries aren't set ever higher targets. That's what's happening at the moment. They're aiming at where we're at, and by the time they've got there, by the time they got to Sweden, we'll be in, I don't know, Las Vegas or somewhere. And God knows where Las Vegas will be, in orbit somewhere. You see what I mean? Everything is moving on. There's this assumption that everything moves on. So I think, well, it's a bit of a cliche to say so, but I think that we do have to stop that somehow. We have to make a transition to a low energy economy, but which is also connected to a low throughput of materials. Now, this is supported, I think, quite interestingly by, let me see, can I make another drawing here? If we, graffiti artist. Let's talk about how we make people happy. In economic terms, generally the answer is very simple. It's just make them richer, and then that will make them happier. And that can be applied either at an individual level or a society's level. You want to increase the level of satisfaction in society, let's make the GNP grow. And at very low levels, that's absolutely true. So if we, along here, this is the GNP, or the standard of living, or some material measure of success, and up here is, I don't know, happiness, satisfaction, let's call it the quality of life, all those intangibles. At first, it's like this, really, isn't it? It's like this. It's very straight. The two things go more or less hand in hand. A little bit of GNP goes a long way to make people better. If you haven't got food, haven't got a shelter, haven't got water, it's pretty miserable. So pretty well everything is down to getting a bit richer. But as we all know, of course, eventually it starts to tail off, doesn't it? It doesn't quite carry on in that one-to-one way. Now, what's interesting, it happened recently, is lots of people have been doing studies of net welfare, and they've been trying to devise different ways of measuring what's going on in society, and not just GNP. They've been trying to measure all sorts of different factors to see whether actually we are getting happier and better off. And generally the results that are coming in are showing something like this. Now that is a surprise, really, because that's sort of not what we expected. That here we are working very hard to get richer, and it's not only not delivering the goods, it actually seems to be making things worse. Now, so that's supported quite a lot by quite a lot of statistics, although it hasn't been recognized very much by the government yet. That would be strange if they were. But the idea is that there is somehow some kind of peak, some kind of optimum level. Now, this is, of course, reflected in popular folklore and in advertising. There's a slide which I'd like to show you. Can I have the slide? Now, this is just something I caught. Yes, there was. Just there's a pub just around the corner from where I live, and here's the lorry delivering the beer. And look at the slogan. Isn't that wonderful? Unspoilt by progress, it says about this beer. Now, what this means is that obviously it wasn't the beer company that made this up, it was some advertising agency. And they sat down and they thought, well, what can we use to sell this beer? And they sort of said, well, everybody knows that progress, which is supposed to mean getting better all the time, everybody knows that there's a downside to progress. And that as you make progress, you sacrifice all these sort of intangible things, like the quality of the beer. The beer gets cheaper, and all that sort of thing. And there's a lot more goods about, but all the other things that we are a bit difficult to put a price on tend to be sacrificed on the way. So this is just all part of common folklore, that we are somehow getting richer, but somehow it is not working. Something's going wrong. The business as usual program is failing. The prevailing paradigm is failing. So we need to have a change in direction, I think, in a very strongly, partly culturally, partly technically. Thank you very much. Now, I've got another version of that, which is in which the indices are slightly are reversed, so it's a little bit confusing. I got this from a absolutely lovely Swiss professor that I met, a Findhorn actually, and he gave a talk, and he said, he said in his view, things have got worse since he was a kid, and we said, well, what do you mean worse? Surely it's better at the dentist, isn't it? Faster cars, space travel. Look at that men on the moon, the Hubble space, etc. We gave him the work. He said no. He felt that really it had been better when he was a kid, and so we said, well, draw it. And he drew a version of the curve that you've just seen. Here we are. This is actually the quality of life bit, and this is the standard living. He drew it like that, yes, just exactly as the other curve, and then it went round again like that. He drew it like that. And then we said, and what do you think we ought to do about it? And he drew this line. And everybody was a bit puzzled about that, because that seems very strange. He's not proposing any increase, really, in the standard of living at all. It's just a completely different kind of economics. He's going on directly on the quality of life. And so then we could see that, in fact, this quite handily divides our task, really, as policymakers, scientists, economists, into three different areas. And this is the normal thing, right? This is what's causing this to curl down, the business as usual technology. And I think we could say it's doomed. I think we could honestly say that the writing's on the wall for that. Just the normal way of going on things. Sooner or later, Ham and Scher will convince the Bundestag, and then we'll all say, "Oh well, look at the Germans. Oh well," and then we'll all have to follow suit, as we so often, as we so often do. Yeah. So that's dead. Okay. Now, the standard, what we might call the light green response, the standard response is that somehow we've got to continue this progress without having a decline in the quality of life. Yeah? You're still supposed to try and make things wealthier, make people wealthier, have more goods in society, make the GNP grow, but we don't want to have a decline in the net satisfaction. So it's, in a sense, it's an attempt to save the existing paradigm by various clever techniques. And most people who are working in sort of environmental technology field are working here, because this is consistent. It's along the grain of modern society. You can get it going. Now here, but I want to draw your attention to here. This is the zone of the weirdos, the people who are really trying to do something completely different, and I think that that's quite important. At the moment, it's completely marginal. We might say that they're sort of recessive genes of technology. They're just sort of completely ignored. You don't know that they're there really, but it is the area of cultural dematerialization. Yes, here we have technical dematerialization. This is cultural dematerialization, and it's very important. And I would like to finish by suggesting some research programs that I think that concerned environmentally aware scientists could perhaps take on, because if they don't do it, nobody else will do it. Now, I'll go back to, perhaps I can use one of these again. Save one, hey? I'll go back to the formula, the P times C times T. Now, it's very characteristic that T is up for grabs. Everybody can talk about T. That's okay. But you're not allowed to talk about C. If you're a proper scientist in a proper university setting or in industry, and so on, you're not supposed to go and messing about with consumption levels, people's standards of living. There's a big taboo on it. You're not allowed to have anything to do with that. You can do the T bit. That's okay. So it defines, tackling C defines a new, well, it could define a new paradigm. Let me draw a little, no, let me use the one with the red squiggle on it. That's a good one. Yeah. Let me draw a little matrix here. T, C. Yeah. Now, who is doing C? It's lifestyle people, people doing lifestyles, bohemians, hippies, people trying, dropouts, all sorts of people like that who are living a different sort of way. They're trying to see what life is like with a much lower level of material consumption. So we call them lifestyle. Now, they're doing some very interesting things, but they don't report their results. They don't monitor themselves. They can't sort out the wheat from the chaff. They can't sort of see what's important and what's not important. They're not quantitative about it. They just all those things are missing and are very, very important in order to amplify the results and show what's a promising path and what isn't. Meanwhile, scientists, right, the lifestyle people, they do C. Great. They do a little bit of T. They mess around with windmills and things, don't they, Peter? Yeah. The scientists do that bit. And what have we got here? An empty cell. It's ripe for colonization. And I think it's about time we got on with it. That cell needs us. It needs technological nous. It needs quantitative approach. It needs careful, appreciating the need for controls and to do that. So I think that we really need to get into these things. And probably we can't just do it in an academic fashion from outside. We've got to get in there. It's got to be like anthropologists, like participant observers. You've got to be right in there in order to do it properly, I think. So again, that's something that an ordinary scientist in industry or in academia wouldn't be able to do. They'd say, well, don't ask me to do that. I'm not supposed to do that. I'm just supposed to turn up at the lab at 9 o'clock and do my work. So it involves a completely different kind of mindset, the kind of mindset that you find here, SMN. So, what sort of thing might we be looking at? Let me give you an example. Let's look at this question of standard of living and how it relates to the quality of life. I'm very interested in the relationship between standard of living and quality of life, because the quality of life is supposed to be a kind of emergent property. It's not supposed to be something you can go for directly. It's supposed to be a kind of emergent property that comes out of standard of living. So if we look at the world, we can see that we've got these different levels, and that's very important. It's very important that what people aspire to take into account of that and try to see where's the environmental impact coming from in these things. How does it relate to it? I think you could obviously say that the environmental impact per head of the stinking rich is drastically greater than the third world poor. But is there somewhere in the middle where we could combine reasonable comfort, reasonable modern comfort with sustainability? This is hopelessly uncomfortable, but it's probably sustainable. At the top, it isn't sustainable at all. Somewhere in the middle there's some interesting stuff, and we need to explore those things. Now, what I've put here is just these two reference cases. Now, I won't go through them in great detail. Perhaps I'll just move it up a bit so you can see. But here we have the eco-bourgeois, and here we have the eco-bohemian. And they have different kinds of technologies just in their houses. Now, I would like to see people designing and living out these things and carefully monitoring the whole thing, so that we could find out, for example, is it the case that the bohemian with these rather low-key, low-tech things has a seriously different environmental impact from the bourgeois? If not, if it turns out that there isn't a great deal of difference, for example, does it make any difference if you don't have a phone? Well, yeah, I mean, it makes a difference to your lifestyle, but does it make a difference to your environmental impact? Probably not. I mean, if they had computers, for example, would that make a great deal of difference? I don't know, but probably not. They haven't got a car. Well, that makes probably that it's difficult to get around that one. But anyway, if it turned out that there wasn't a great deal of difference, then I would say, because nobody wants to do this, I mean, only most people don't want to do this, then I'd say, well, what we've got to do is that we've got to work on this and make it more sustainable. Right? Now, if there's a big difference, let's say this was 80% better or something than this, then, and that this was sustainable and that wasn't sustainable, then this is the basis on which we need to work, and we need to improve it. See, at the moment, nobody's going to buy it, except a few freaks. But we could improve it. We could use our research to find out how to do this in such a way that it becomes quite cool to do it. Maybe. To give you another example, we can take all sorts of prospective eco-technologies and we can classify them in terms of how acceptable they are to. Right. Again, this classification was done by a group of students. I just gave them a big list of environmental technologies. I said, put them into 4 different groups. Really, ones are very, very acceptable, really cool stuff that everybody would buy. At the other end, things that are so repulsive that you'd never be able to sell it. And in the middle, various other things. Now, the interesting thing about this, you could make many versions of this, and it could be the basis for an important research program. I think that we don't need to worry about these because these are so acceptable; they'll happen anyway. Yeah, we don't. I mean, lead-free petrol is an obvious example. It's happening anyway. They're just so acceptable and they're so cool that everybody wants to do them. So that's okay. On this end. Well, it's very difficult to market some of these things, I should think. But it's notable that if everybody did this, applying Kant's categorical imperative, as mentioned this morning, if everybody did this, we'd probably have sustainability overnight. Whereas the effect of these on the overall impact is probably rather small. So we've got this funny dilemma that the things that are highly acceptable are neither here nor there in environmental terms, and the things that really make a difference are not particularly acceptable. Okay, now we haven't got a lot of time, to sort a lot of these things out. So I would say what we should be doing is to try to find things here which are susceptible to improvement in some kind of way. So something that could be lifted out of there and made into something, that could be shifted over here. I mean, it's a marketing job, really. But probably some people have to do some fundamental research living these things out and finding out what it's like. For example, in my experimental house, the house next door, I've been trying to find out what level of heating is comfortable for me, because I know that for every degree lower the thermostat is set, you save 10% of your heating. Right? So the normal design temperature is 21 or something absolutely ridiculous. 18, most people find perfectly comfortable. So if you do, why not put it down at 18 and be comfortable and save 30% of your bill? Okay, what about 15? Is that getting a bit cold? 12 is definitely very chilly. The children complain at that. But actually, I've found 14, 15, if everybody's got the thermal underwear on, nobody says a word. Okay, that's a good example. Here we are, thermal underwear, you see. It provokes a joke, you see. But in fact, as a technology, it's absolutely brilliant. It maintains the temperature exactly where you want it, inside your body, right? So it's absolutely brilliant energy technology, but it's not considered as much. It's not considered an energy technology, but it's extremely important. And it's much cheaper than heating the whole house up. So you see, it's supremely rational. It's just that it falls foul of what we might say prevailing taste. And it's part of the job of radical scientists sorting these things out to try to improve the technologies, get it better, and work these things into prevailing taste. Okay, now I think that if we were to embark on various programs like this, we would find something rather paradoxical. So we might start off gritting our teeth and saying, I'll do this for a couple of years, all right, and then I want to get back to my nice lab job, nice and warm. And we would find we enjoyed it. We would find that we liked it. I will solemnly predict this, that because we've got to remember that there will be lots of delicious side effects to all this as you start clearing away the clutter of modern society. We've got to remember that physical energy is just a kind of vulgar manifestation of the real thing. Subtle energy, yes. It's just an outer manifestation. And we've got to remember also that energy, what it means is inner work. That's the meaning of the original word. So its true meaning, I think, refers to real energy, which is real subtle energy. And the problem about subtle energy is that you can't see it because there's too much of this other stuff about. It's just like the huge din going on in a room and you can't hear a quiet conversation. It's like that. It's just drowned out by incredible noise. So, I think as we reduce the amount of physical energy used in society, then the subtle energies will start to emerge. And it'll just be like the deepening evening as the stars start coming out one at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. That was just lovely. Before we go on, I'd like to draw your attention to Michael Rose. Where's Michael? Michael's at the back there. For those of you in the Arts Centre who can't see Michael, he's standing at the back of this room. And Michael says, how can you save on your energy bill and also gain free government grants? And he's going to put sheets like this on the table, the middle table out in the foyer. And any of you who wish to can take information from there or chat to him over dinner. Wonderful. I like the last bit very much indeed.
I thought you would.
Yeah. It goes in very much to the Mystics and Scientists Conference. You didn't say much, although you said it was going to happen, you said very little about a hydrogen technology. And it seems to me that if we've got to get over this bump, one of the ways of dumping water into the atmosphere rather than carbon dioxide would be a hydrogen technology. Could you just say a word about that?
I'm already wired up, yes, thank you. Yes, obviously that's one of the great white hopes. It's just that it just hasn't started to happen yet because we haven't seriously put any money into research. But I mean, the basic stuff is all there. Sorry? Oh, sorry. I don't know what... Yeah, right, let me... Peter just mentioned about the hydrogen economy, and I should just mention for those who might be unaware of it, that in principle we could use renewable energies where there's a surplus. For example, half the Sahara could be covered with photovoltaic panels, producing huge amounts of electricity that there's nobody there to use, but it could be used to convert water into hydrogen. Now, hydrogen can be used as a fuel just like gas, like natural gas, or it can be substituted for petrol. And when it burns back to water again. Yeah, there's no CO2, there's no carbon involved at all. So it could be used as a tradable, movable fuel in exactly the same way that we use gas and oil today, and it could be clean. So I think towards the end of the next century, I am sure, I'm willing to bet on it, that basically the tradable fuel will be hydrogen. We'll be using hydrogen. And anything of that kind that we do that can help to either narrow or chop the top off this dreadful peak, I think we really have to go for it in a big way. But that's, of course, big-scale technology. It's not something that can be done... don't try this at home, folks,
Okay, Tony. You have to wait for the microphone.
My name is Tony Pritchard. I'd like to know, no mention has been made so far in this conference about any of the rumoured free energy devices. There's such things as water fuel cells and coal fusion devices. What do you think about this, or do you not think about them?
I just live in hope, like everybody else. Until there's evidence that I find convincing, then you can't just plan on the basis of hope, really. A bit. My colleague Chris, who's here, also from the centre, he's very keen on all this stuff. I'm a bit sceptical, I must say. I remain sceptical until convinced. Because I've just lived through too many wonderful stories about the latest great white thing. I've seen lots of it, so I tend to remain sceptical. But one day, I think one of them will turn out to be the one, and then it will be very good if we can do that. So I have a completely open mind about it, but I can't add anything. Peter probably can say more about it than I.
Okay, let's go across to the Arts Centre. David.
Yes, Peter.
And any comments, first of all, before you give us a question?
No, I'd be happy to pass over the questions directly who's near the microphone? Somebody
Me.
has the microphone. Yes.
Me, the
Question
disembodied
coming.
voice
Yes.
from the Arts Centre, the voice of Michael Boddington. Hi. I can see you, but you can't see me. Which sort of puts me at a psychological advantage. I'm Michael Boddington from the Global Action Plan, Peter. You didn't mention the Global Action Plan. The Global Action Plan are the inhabitants of the empty cell. So the empty cell isn't quite empty. There are people there and there are people working on it. And what you might not know is that one of the great advantages of the Global Action Plan is that things are measured. That we are working with people in their own homes to change lifestyles, as far as people want to change lifestyles, if they want to change lifestyles, and measuring the effects. Not necessarily measuring their happiness, but nonetheless measuring their effects on the environment. So that's important. But what I want to take issue with you about, as you knew somebody would, was your journey to Sweden. I'm very worried about your journey to Sweden, Peter.
Don't like the mountains?
Well, that particular mountain, I mean, it does actually cut across completely the notion of sustainability and sustainable development, because the notion of sustainability, as you know, as enunciated by the Brundtland Commission, is that it is development which serves the needs of the present population without compromising the ability of future generations to serve their own needs. Now, what you are doing...
Can you just hold on a second? Can you all hear this? Yes. You can? Okay, fine. I was having difficulty, so I thought other people might be too, but they're not.
Sorry, right. What you are proposing is that we set aside all sorts of environmental nasties that we're a bit iffy about and say we'll leave those to future generations to deal with because we don't have the wherewithal to deal with them at the moment. Now, part of ensuring that future generations can secure their own welfare is ensuring that we pass on a capital base. In fact, the whole of it is ensuring that we pass on a capital base, no matter how that is constituted, that is at least as great as the one that we have. And it seems to me that you are creating all sorts of hostages to fortune in what you're promoting by saying, well, we won't deal with nuclear nasties at the moment because we can't afford to. And if we can't afford to do it now, I don't think that we have any right to wish that onto future generations, whether in Sweden or elsewhere.
Thank you. I think that is a very good point. And of course, ethically, I completely agree. It's just that it seems to me, from my understanding of the resources at our disposal and the forces that are about to be unleashed, that we won't have a choice. We won't be able to do everything. And so what I'm saying is that let's put aside the reversible things and let's concentrate everything we can on the irreversible things, because if when you get to Sweden there are no tigers, there's nothing you can do about it. When you get to Sweden there's some nuclear waste on the surface to think about what to do with. I'm sure that my descendants living in Sweden would prefer to have that problem and rather than no tigers. See what I mean? If there's a choice. I hope that we can do everything. That would be lovely. It's just I fear that we may not. So we ought to have a ranked list. We ought to have a preference list of really important medium-term sustainability issues which we tackle first and put resources to, and then other things if we can manage it. So there should be a prioritized list in that kind of thing. I mean, I have the same values as you do. It's just that I seem to be applying them in a slightly different way.
Thank you very much. Right, one from this room now, Peter Stewart. Can we have the microphone on in here? That's better.
Okay. I've actually done quite a bit of work in superconductivity, and I think you may have glossed over that a bit too easily. because we're beginning to get high temperature superconductivity coming along, where we're using liquid nitrogen instead of the helium, and also it's beginning to even go above that. Now, if we do that, we've then got superconducting generating systems, superconducting transmission systems, and superconducting motors. So the actual power required and the energy required to actually drive the technology and to drive the civilization may drop off quite considerably. Have you actually thought about that?
Well, I think it's probably fair to say that's an element of the T. It's making things more efficient. It's not actually a source of energy in its own right, any more than hydrogen is a source of energy in its own right. It's just a handy way of moving it around. So if my hypothetical Sahara covered with photovoltaics, it could turn it to hydrogen, but equally it could use superconducting cables to ship it all off all over the world, with very little losses.
What I was trying to get at is it will actually need less energy. You won't have to generate and use the amount of energy, therefore the energy requirement will come down.
Yes, that's right. It'll be more efficient to do it that way,
right.
Yes.
Is that going to make a significant difference or not?
Well, I think the whole question about efficiency, it depends on what we're going to consume. The more we consume, the more we have to be efficient in order to keep the environmental impact at a steady level, you see what I mean? So if we think that we can carry on increasing efficiency or reducing intensity indefinitely, then we could carry on increasing consumption indefinitely. What I feel is that the relationship between consumption and happiness, let's say, to put it crudely, is not much really. So we might as well stop now. In which case, any increases in efficiency can go towards reducing environmental impact rather than increasing consumption.
Okay, David, do you have one for us from the Arts Centre?
Yes, we do. Microphone's on its way.
Yes, I may just point out, I come from Australia, and one morning when I switched the radio on, I was very lucky to listen to Dr. Suzuki, David Suzuki, the famous biologist whom you probably all know. And he was then, again, on one of his crusades in which he mentioned that more than 1,700 prominent scientists throughout the world, including over 105 living Nobel Prize recipients, have signed a petition which they state, unless we change our whole lifestyle, agricultural practices as we do know them, the way we eat, what we eat, vegetarianism including and all this, we will not have more than 5 to 10 years to do these things right, and we are facing a calamity in which there are 156 species a day wiped out, including either plants or little crawlies. And it will be very serious also, the global warming and the possible cataclysmic effect on the greenhouse effect, which can be called a chaos effect, where we're ending a critical stage where no prediction can be anymore be relied on. So we're looking at a total revolution where only a coercion by necessity could come about if through our education system people like you over there can put proper grafts out and get them into high places to stimulate and promulgate an attitude that would have to be implemented by a benevolent kind of panel or dictatorship worldwide in order to salvage what we can. We probably can only buy more time, yeah? And time is all we have. And that is the most valuable thing we can pass on our so-called children. And population is, of course, on top of the pyramid. It stands right up. And below this comes consumption and lifestyle. But all this together has to come to a spiritual concept that's holistic. And to me, and the observation the observer has, true spirituality, or the measure, if we were ever to measure what is spirituality, we can best define it perhaps in how a nation or a group of people stands up within a given territory and how little it is killing its own kind and is supporting creature, meaning how long it can maintain itself. That is the only measure that can be seen as, to me, value of true spirituality. It means sustainability over time. We're failing very badly. In Australia, we have managed to, I would say, it took us 210 years to destroy the country. And as you all must know, part of the great destruction that takes place comes through cattle grazing. And I may point out our lifestyle now, where the warning is there with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, that people should turn to vegetarianism and should be aware on several grounds. The one is, it's ethical right not to torture animals. It's ethical right to give an animal the food that it's designed for, that's genetically also acceptable. It is only right to treat an animal with respect. And the present agricultural practices, which are biological suicide, are unsustainable on ecological grounds. I may point out there's 230 million tons of surplus grain.
Can you focus the question, do you think?
Well, I would only like, what have you been doing to promulgate this to the governments and to responsible people? What have you been doing? Are you aware of the World Watch Institute's information?
Thank you.
Yes, I'm certainly aware of the World Watch, and also of the Global Action Plan, and yes, very remiss of me not to mention that actually, because that is indeed doing some very important initiatives in this direction. I think the difficulty is that we have not yet captured the intellectual high ground. We who have these ideas, if we are right, it will probably take us another 10 years or so in order to convince the opinion formers, if you like, because at the moment it isn't happening. You know, we are a tiny minority at the moment, growing, and we are growing in influence, but it takes quite a while to do that. Then it will take the opinion forming part of society quite a long time to persuade everybody else, because everybody else is mad keen, it seems to me, in my experience, with the present paradigm. Everybody wants to carry on because that's the pattern that they've learnt, and that the whole of society's social games are tied up to consumption. And in fact, there's a very strong relationship between the dynamics of capital, the dynamics of international markets, and the culture, or cult, I could perhaps even call it, of more. I mean, that's the slogan of modern society, is more, isn't it? And in fact, the markets operate on more. They are always trying to corner more resources and so on. And so I think that probably one of the things we have to do is to work out a kind of neo-Marxist critique of the way markets and capital operate, because that's clearly one of the big barriers between us and sustainable society. And it's normally neglected in green circles. And unfortunately, you know, sort of socialism seems to have given up and gone home somewhere. Perhaps it's under a table somewhere, or under a bed. I mean, it was about time it came out from under the bed and and sort of dusted off its old feathers and threw away all that historical junk. I think we need to work that out again. Really, it's very, very important. I think the way international markets work is very anti-ecological.
Okay, we have time for two more short questions. Just one hit from here and one from the Arts Centre, and you already have the microphone.
John Collins, to say thank you very much. I enjoyed your talk very much. Can I return us from the ethical and the spiritual down to the mundane and throw in one or two numbers into your final calculations? Like you, I can work at a temperature of 15 degrees very comfortably. I cannot be sedentary or immobile at that level of temperature. All developed countries' populations are aging. The old can maintain their body temperature less well than the young. And if you try to achieve the temperatures you're suggesting, then the numbers of admissions with hypothermia will multiply enormously.
Yes, that's a lovely point. I wasn't suggesting that people go down below where they are comfortable. I just suggest that you go down to find the comfort point, and then you stay there, because that's the cheapest, you know, way you can do it. I should say, incidentally, that where I work at home, when I'm working, you know, with my computer and so on, I have a desk which is rather like this one with a big cloth on it, and there's a very small radiator underneath it, and I don't need to heat the rest of the house, basically, as long as I'm sitting there, working. All my feet are lovely and warm, as long as I've got my thermals on and all that stuff. I mean, it sounds a bit, you know, sort of hair shirt and so on, but I mean, it's another research program that I'd like to see somebody try out. I don't think even Global Action Plan have tried this, is to set up a budget, an energy budget for yourself. Let's say you set yourself an energy budget of 5,000 kilowatt hours. You say, that's what I've got to spend in the course of a year. It's just like any other budget. Now, how would you spend that? You could use that much on heating hot water easily in the normal So you've got very, very careful if you've got very small budgets. Somebody else might, you could start with say 15,000 kilowatt hours, and then real advanced people could try for 2,000 or something like that. But it would be very interesting if we had energy budgets in the same way that we have money budgets. It would be very interesting to see how we would spend them. We certainly wouldn't be able to spend any on the car because it would be gone in a weekend. But then you would be very careful. You would start to see that people value radio lights much more than they do lots of other things. Basically, in answer to your question, I think I don't want anything draconian. I think if you try to twist people's arms in that kind of way, it just backfires. It doesn't work. Everything's got to be done by persuasion and consent and so on. I think that's very, very important.
Right, we come up for our last question now from the Arts Centre.
Yes.
My name is Anne McEwen, and I might be classified as one of these grannies who insist on getting on the road. You mentioned somewhere quality of life, and you mentioned medium-term problems. Have you anything to say about cars and the continued big increase of cars on the road in the West?
Well, of course, cars are the big bogeyman, aren't they, for nearly all green-thinking people. I don't know. I mean, I've got a car, but in general, I hate them. I remember the time when I was a kid when in London when nobody had a car. Nobody I knew had a car. The streets were free. Kids were in the streets all the time because there were no cars. It was perfectly safe to be in the streets, and that was our social space. And very nice it was too. And now we haven't got that anymore. The cars have got that space, and I really resent it, and I resent it on behalf of my children. But who am I to talk? I've got a car, So, we're all sort of tarred with this funny kind of hypocrisy. It's interesting that, my colleague Chris, actually, his put your hand up, Chris. Their car broke down, and they decided as a family that they were going to not get another one, and that doesn't often happen. But they decided to invest their money into bicycles. And this is very interesting. And I think that another feature of scientists getting into this lifestyle lark is that they're a bit better off than most of the bohemians and lifestyle people who haven't got any money to invest in these things. But you can get scientists doing things very, very stylish way. So, for example, when it comes to bicycles, there aren't just old sort of gridiron bicycles. There are some fantastic bicycles now. I mean, they cost thousands of pounds, but they are... No, honestly, they are wonderful bicycles. They are fashion items. In fact, there's an incredible magazine. It's one of my favourite magazines. It's called Bike Culture Quarterly. And it costs £5 each one. It's the glossiest magazine I know. And it's fantastic. And it's absolutely savage about the car culture. It's loathed. It drips of vitriol on the car culture. And it exalts the wonderful world of bicycles in a completely non-defensive way. And it's just fantastic. This whole world of biking people. They've got these human-powered vehicles with fairings on them. They've got recumbents. They've got double ones. They've got tricycles. And they've got everything. It's fan trailers. Chris has got a lovely trailer. They just put the kids in the back of the trailer and they go everywhere. And it's, is he unhappy? Look at him.
Peter, perhaps I can just add a statistic which I heard from a friend recently, which is interesting. That you remember we had these tremendous strikes in Paris at the end of last year. I understand from a friend that led to the sale of 500,000 bicycles in Paris alone. Makes you think.
Yes. It's particularly in cities, I think. In the countryside, the density of cars is much less, but the combination of private vehicles and cities is absolutely daft. I mean, that's just crazy. It's just habit that keeps us doing it, So we just need to clear the lot out, and then we can think of lots of other better ways to get around in cities.
Peter, that was a wonderful talk. Thank you very much indeed. I'm very interested to see that at long last technology people are doing what we're only just doing recently in the neurosciences, and that's quality of life. Do you realize when I went to a conference in 1987 on the effects of surgery on the brain, it was people who had epilepsy, the outcome measure, believe it or not, was whether their seizures stopped. I held my hand up and said, hey, listen, it's not that, it's are they better after it? And there was this sort of silence. Better? because people weren't thinking in those terms. And one of the wonderful things that you have shown us this evening is that quality of life is one of the most important variables. I got a lot of hope and optimism from your graphs, because I've only seen those ones before where they go off right into the ceiling and keep on going, and a group of people around the bottom of the on the stage pointing up to the ceiling and saying it's going to keep on going unless we do something. But what you were saying is it's actually not going to be like that. It's going to come back anyway because of the natural evolution of society. And I find that a very helpful message and a very hopeful message, because it means that the problem isn't totally out of control and there are things which we can do about it. I only hope you're right. So what I'd like to do is to thank you very much indeed for a wonderful talk, beautifully given, absolutely, and ending with subtle energies. Perfect. Thank you.